Now, at 35, I am the head of Ross Heritage Jewelers, a luxury jewelry chain known across the country. I live in the magnificent mansion my grandfather left behind, with status, wealth, and a happy little family by my side. But this glittering success cannot erase the memory of that 12-year-old boy. Waking up in a rundown trailer, discovering that my parents had left, leaving only a scribbled note, "Find your grandfather, he'll take care of you." From that moment, my life embarked on a grueling journey, one that shaped the person I am today. My name is Ashton Ross. I grew up on the western edge of Oklahoma City, where dusty winds rattled the flimsy tin walls around us. We lived in a trailer that had little to offer, a tiny living room with a tattered sofa, a greasy-smelling kitchen corner, and 2 bedrooms so cramped they seemed only big enough to hold our nightmares. My father, Patrick Ross, was once the owner of an auto repair garage, but by the time I was 7, he was a shadow of his former self. The business went bankrupt and he sank into gambling. I still remember the nights he came home, eyes bloodshot, reeking of cheap whiskey. He'd yell at Mom, blaming her for everything, from unpaid electric bills to his losses at the casino. "Paula, don't you see I'm trying?" he'd bellow, slamming his fist on the table, sending a glass tumbling to shatter on the floor. My mother, Paula Ross, was a small, frail woman with eyes always tinged with sadness. She worked as a waitress at a diner near the highway, taking day shifts, night shifts, whenever they called her. I remember her coming home, hands trembling as she set a bag of leftover food from the diner on the table, saying in a hoarse voice, "Eat, Ashton. Eat, Ashton. I'm not hungry." But I knew she was hungry. She always gave her share to me, silently enduring. And her hunger wasn't just for food. In her eyes, I saw another kind of longing, a yearning for a better life, one she never had the chance to reach. Mom tried to hold the family together, but day by day she grew quieter, her gaze drifting to some distant place I couldn't follow. Once I saw her sitting alone in a corner of the room, face buried in her hands, crying. When I asked, she waved me off. "It's nothing, Ashton. I'm just tired." I vividly recall one stormy night, the wind howling through the cracks in the door, mingling with the shouting inside. Dad, drunk out of his mind, threw a stack of unpaid bills onto the table, his voice raspy. "All you do is bring home pennies. How's that supposed to keep this house afloat?" Mom stood at the sink, hands soaked, trying to stay calm, but her voice trembled. "At least I bring money home, instead of burning it all at the casino like you." The words barely left her mouth before Dad lunged forward, gripping a whiskey glass tightly before hurling it to the floor. Shards scattered, liquor pooling across the linoleum. I hid behind my bedroom door, heart pounding, watching Mom's silhouette shrink as if she might break. In that moment, I had a vague premonition that our family was sliding toward an ending we couldn't escape. That fateful morning, when I was 12, the air was biting cold, seeping through every crack in the trailer. I woke up on my narrow bed, the thin blanket barely keeping me warm. The living room was eerily silent. No arguments between my parents, no clatter of dishes in the kitchen, not even Mom's voice urging me to get ready for school. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, sensing something was wrong. "Mom?" I called, my voice hoarse from the cold. No answer. "Dad?" I tried again, stepping out of my room, my bare feet shivering on the icy wooden floor. The living room was empty. The kitchen was empty. My parents' bedroom was the same, the bed unmade, the closet flung open, a few old clothes strewn across the floor. My heart raced, a sickening feeling rising. I ran to the dining table, where Mom usually left a note reminding me to eat breakfast before school. There, in the middle of the table, was a small piece of paper torn hastily from an old notebook. I picked it up, hands trembling. In my father's scrawled handwriting, a single line in ballpoint pen. "Find your grandfather, he'll take care of you." I stood frozen, the paper slipping from my fingers to the floor. My mind went blank, a single question looping endlessly. Where did they go? Why? I ran outside, ignoring the biting cold, scanning the barren lot around the trailer. No one. No sign of Dad's old pickup truck, no trace of Mom. Just the wind whistling through the dry grass and the sound of my heart pounding in my chest. They were gone. My parents had abandoned me, alone in this frigid trailer, without explanation, without goodbye. I went back to the table, picked up the note, and read it over and over as if it might change, as if it might say this was just a cruel joke. But no, just 10 short, cold words that tore my heart apart. I sank into a chair, covering my face, trying not to cry. But the tears came hot against my freezing hands. I was only 12. What had I done wrong? Why didn't they want me anymore? The question gnawed at me, sharp as a knife. Then I remembered my grandfather, Howard Ross. His name sent a shiver through me. He was wealthy, the owner of Ross Heritage Jewelers, the most prestigious luxury jewelry chain in the region. But he wasn't the warm storybook grandfather. He was known for being stern, cold, and particularly dismissive of children. He never smiled, never asked about me like other grandparents might. The thought of seeking him out terrified me. He lived in a world apart, a mansion on a hill in Nichols Hills where the wealthy resided behind tall iron gates and guarded by security. How could I, a 12-year-old in tattered clothes, step into that world? How could I face those cold eyes alone? But I had no choice. My parents had left me with nothing but a note and a name: Howard Ross. I didn't know if he would truly take me in, but I knew I couldn't stay here, in this freezing trailer where every memory was steeped in pain. Summoning all my courage, I put on my worn-out jacket, stuffed the note into my pocket, and stepped out of the trailer. The cold wind pushed against me as if trying to knock me down, but I kept walking, one step at a time, along the rough dirt road leading away from the trailer park. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew this moment, when my parents abandoned me, would change my life forever. The Oklahoma winter cold didn't just seep through my thin jacket. It burrowed deep into my chest. My worn-out sneakers, their soles nearly gone, slapped against the pitted red dirt road. I hugged myself tightly, trying to hold on to the last scraps of warmth. But the real chill didn't come from the weather. It came from the emptiness in my heart. The note in my pocket felt like a heavy weight, a constant reminder that they had chosen to abandon me, that I was now utterly alone. My grandfather's house in Nichols Hills was miles away, and I had no car, no money, not even a phone to call anyone. But I knew I had to find him. My parents' trailer, now just an empty shell, held memories of arguments, bitter words, and now their final betrayal. I decided to head to Tommy's house, my best friend, a few blocks away. He and his dad, Hank, were the only people I thought might help me now. When I reached Tommy's house, the sun had climbed higher, but the cold refused to relent. Their home was a small wooden place, not much better than mine, but at least it was warm, with the faint smell of toasted bread in the air. I knocked, my hands trembling. Tommy opened the door, his eyes widening in surprise. "Ashton? Why are you here so early? What's wrong?" He pulled me inside, and when he saw my state, scared, eyes red, he went quiet, as if sensing something terrible had happened. I told Tommy and his dad everything. I pulled out the note, handed it to Hank, my voice choking. "My parents, they're gone. They left this." Hank read the note, his brows furrowing. He was a big man, a truck driver with a weathered face but kind eyes. "Ashton, you sure? Maybe they just went somewhere for a bit," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. He knew, as I did, that my parents weren't the type to leave a note like that for a short trip. "I need to get to my grandfather's," I said, my voice trembling. "In Nichols Hills. I don't know how, but I've got nowhere else to go." Hank sighed, placing a hand on my shoulder. "All right, kid. I'll drive you. But you're eating something first. Can't let you go on an empty stomach." I sat in Tommy's kitchen, eating a slice of toast Hank insisted I take, but the food had no taste. My mind swirled with images of my grandfather, Howard Ross. He was wealthy, the owner of Ross Heritage Jewelers, the most renowned luxury jewelry chain in the region. But he was no warm, storybook granddad. He was known for being stern and cold, especially toward kids. He had 3 sons, my father, Patrick, the eldest, then Uncle Anthony and Uncle Philip. None of them could stand his harsh demeanor, so none worked for his company. Mom once said that Grandpa saw Dad and my uncles as failures. My father, despite being the eldest, was no exception. "He never forgives mistakes," she'd whispered, her eyes distant, "and he doesn't like kids." The few times I'd met Grandpa when I was younger left me with a heavy feeling. He lived in a different world, a mansion in Nichols Hills, where the wealthy gathered, with pristine streets, perfectly trimmed trees, and houses like castles. I remembered the last time I saw him when I was 10. He sat in his grand living room dressed in a black suit, staring at me with icy eyes. "Stand up straight, Ashton," he'd said, his voice sharp. "Don't slouch like a loser." I was so scared I couldn't speak, just stood there, feeling like I was on trial. Now the thought of facing those eyes again without my parents by my side made my heart clench. After eating, Hank grabbed his old pickup truck and I sat in the passenger seat, clutching my backpack with a few clothes and that fateful note. The drive felt longer than it was, or maybe it was just me, each mile pulling me closer to a foreign world. Oklahoma City passed by the window. The slums gave way to wider roads, towering buildings, and finally the upscale neighborhoods of Nichols Hills. As we turned onto the road leading up the hill, I saw it. Grandpa's mansion. It wasn't just a house. It was a fortress with towering iron gates, security cameras peeking from stone walls, and 2 guards stationed at the entrance. The sprawling lawn was meticulously maintained with vibrant red flower beds and lush green trees. The main house loomed massive with white columns and a red-tiled southern-style roof, like something from a movie about the elite. But to me, it wasn't beautiful, it was terrifying, like a monster with its jaws open waiting for me to step inside. Hank stopped the truck at the gate, exchanging a few words with the guard through the intercom. A moment later, the iron gate creaked open. He patted my shoulder. "You okay, Ashton?" "I can stay if you need me." I shook my head, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, Hank. Thanks." But I wasn't fine. I was scared, confused, and the loneliness had never felt so stark. I stepped out of the truck, backpack slung over my shoulder, and walked through the gate. The guard led me across the lawn to the massive wooden front door. A middle-aged man in a crisp black suit with neatly combed hair appeared. He introduced himself as Raymond Lawson, Grandpa's new butler. "Master Ashton," he said, his voice calm but formal. "Mr. Howard is waiting for you in his study." I swallowed hard, feeling like I was walking into a courtroom. Raymond led me through a grand hallway lined with paintings and gleaming marble floors. Everything screamed wealth, but it was cold, devoid of the warmth a real home should have. At the end of the hall, he stopped before a heavy oak door. He knocked lightly, and a deep voice echoed from within. "Come in." Raymond opened the door, and I stepped inside. Grandpa, Howard Ross, sat behind a massive wooden desk, dressed in a gray suit. His silver hair swept back, his eyes sharp as knives. He looked at me, no smile, no warmth, just a curt command. "Sit down, Ashton." I obeyed, my legs trembling. His gaze seemed to pierce through me, as if weighing my worth. "I know what your parents have done," he said, his voice dry. "From now on, you're staying here. But don't expect to be coddled. There's no room for weakness in this house." I sat silent, my heart pounding, unable to meet his eyes. I knew, in that moment, my life would never be the same. This mansion, with all its grandeur and coldness, would be my new home, and my first battlefield. "Ashton," my grandfather continued, his voice low but sharp, "from now on, you're part of this family. But this family is not a place for daydreaming or laziness. You will live by my rules." He handed me a piece of paper with 5 lines of handwritten text, the writing firm and neat, just like the man himself. My heart pounded as I skimmed it. "Be punctual. Be financially independent. Never lie. Take responsibility. Train your mind, body, and soul. These are the 5 golden rules," Grandpa said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You will live by them, or you will have no place in this house." I nodded, not daring to ask questions, though my mind was a storm of them. Financially independent? I was only 12, how was I supposed to have money? Train my mind, body, and soul, what did that even mean? But Grandpa's piercing gaze made it clear this wasn't the time for questions. Raymond Lawson, the butler, led me out of the study into my new room on the second floor. The room was 3 times the size of my old bedroom, with a large bed, a walnut wardrobe, and a window overlooking the lush garden. But it didn't make me feel at ease. Everything here was too perfect, too foreign, as if I were an outsider trying to fit into a painting that didn't belong to me. Raymond placed a hand on my shoulder, gentle but firm. "Young master, don't be afraid," he said, his voice warm yet steady. "Mr. Howard is strict, but he does this for your own good. Try your best and you'll understand." Those first days were a nightmare. Every morning the alarm blared at 5:30 and I had to get up to jog around the sprawling garden. I hated running. My legs ached, my breath came in gasps, and the morning chill made me want to crawl back under the covers. But Raymond was always there, stopwatch in hand, his gaze stern. "Rule number 5, Master Ashton," he'd remind me. "Train your body." Mr. Howard doesn't tolerate laziness. I gritted my teeth and trudged on, though inside I wanted to scream that I didn't belong here. At my new school, a private academy for wealthy kids in Nichols Hills, things were even worse. Grandpa enrolled me there within the first week, handing me a crisp new uniform that felt like someone else's armor. The other kids stared at me like I was an alien. "You're the abandoned grandson of Mr. Ross, huh?" A blond boy in an expensive shirt sneered as I walked into class. His words cut like a knife, reopening wounds that hadn't yet healed. I bowed my head, pretending not to hear, but inside a storm of anger and humiliation raged. I wanted to run, to return to my old run-down trailer where at least I knew I belonged. But running wasn't an option. Grandpa wouldn't allow it. Every evening I had to sit at the desk in my room doing homework under Raymond's watchful eye. If I lagged, Grandpa would appear at the door, silent, his gaze making me feel smaller than ever. Once I sneaked a game on the old computer Raymond had lent me, thinking no one would know. But the next morning, Grandpa summoned me to his study. "Rule number 3, Ashton," he said, his voice cold as ice. "Never lie. And don't think you can fool me." He confiscated the computer and ordered me to clean the entire backyard garden as punishment. I worked until I was exhausted, my hands scratched from thorny bushes, but when I looked into his eyes, I saw no anger, just expectation, as if he were testing whether I'd break. Mistakes like that happened often. I was late to school because I overslept, skipped workouts because I was tired, even lied about finishing homework to get a break. Each time, Grandpa handled it with strict but fair consequences. He didn't yell like Dad or cry like Mom. He simply imposed a punishment and expected me to correct myself. "Discipline isn't about punishment, Ashton," he said once as I stood before him, drenched in sweat after cleaning the garage for 3 hours. "It's about forging you into a man." At first, his words only made me angry. I didn't want to become a man his way. I just wanted to be a kid, loved and protected. But slowly, through the suffocating months under his iron discipline, I began to realize something. The punishments weren't meant to hurt me. They were meant to teach me to be stronger. Time passed like a gust of wind, and I went from a 12-year-old boy to a 15-year-old teenager, then 18, living in my grandfather Howard Ross's mansion. Nichols Hills, with its pristine streets and castle-like homes, remained a foreign world to me. But I learned to survive in it, step by step, under my grandfather's stern oversight. Beyond schoolwork, Grandpa required me to do odd jobs at his company, Ross Heritage Jewelers. On weekends, while my peers rested, I had to be at the main office in downtown Oklahoma City, running errands, organizing paperwork, or observing boardroom meetings. The first time I stepped into the company's gleaming glass building, I was awestruck. The jewelry displays sparkled under the lights, with diamonds and pearls arranged like works of art. But I wasn't allowed to touch or daydream. "You're here to learn, not to gawk," Grandpa said, his voice sharp when he caught me staring at a sapphire ring. If you want a place in this world, you have to work for it. The tasks were menial, but they taught me my first lessons in responsibility. I had to check invoices, ensure numbers matched, and if I got a single digit wrong, Grandpa would summon me to his office, point to the mistake, and ask, "How much do you think this error costs, Ashton?" I'll never forget the first time I messed up a delivery form. Grandpa didn't yell, but his gaze made me feel smaller than ever. "Fix it. Now," he said, then turned away, leaving me alone with the paperwork until midnight. My teenage years were far from easy. They were filled with challenges, from the grueling lessons at school to the mistakes I made at work. But in those years, I learned that strength doesn't come from never falling. It comes from getting back up each time you do. Grandpa, with his iron discipline, and Raymond with his quiet kindness, together shaped me, day by day, step by step. I began to realize that I wasn't just an abandoned boy. I was Ashton Ross, and I was carving my own path. When I entered my final years of university, I was no longer the awkward boy in a school uniform. I was 21, taller, broader-shouldered, and my gaze no longer shied away when provoked. But deep inside, I still carried the scar of the day my parents abandoned me. A reminder that I had to be strong, not just for myself, but to prove I was worthy of the name Ross. My grandfather began entrusting me with bigger responsibilities in the company. No longer just running errands or checking invoices, I was allowed to participate in real projects, sit in strategic meetings, and even contribute ideas. "You're not here to be a bystander, Ashton," my grandfather said during one meeting, his gaze as sharp as ever. "Speak up or don't sit here at all." Those words, though harsh, were an invitation. My grandfather wanted me to prove myself, not just to him but to the board of directors, men and women in expensive suits, who always looked at me with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. One morning in my final year of university, I received an email from my grandfather asking me to prepare for a major project, negotiating with a diamond supplier from South Africa to secure a supply for the company's new collection. It was the first time I had been given such a significant task, and the pressure weighed on my shoulders like a boulder. I spent weeks researching, reading everything I could about the diamond market, from pricing to quality, from sourcing to transportation logistics. I stayed up until 3 a.m., my eyes blurring in front of the laptop screen, but I didn't dare complain. The day of the negotiation arrived, and I walked into the meeting room with my heart pounding. Across from me was Mr. Johan van der Merwe, a seasoned supplier from Johannesburg with sharp eyes and a half-smile. My grandfather sat at the head of the table, silent, but his gaze was like a blade ready to cut through any mistake I made. The meeting went smoothly for the first 30 minutes until Mr. van der Merwe suddenly announced that his supplier was considering pulling out of the deal because a competitor had offered a better price. The room fell silent. I felt the blood rush to my face, sweat beading on my forehead. This was the defining moment. Either I salvaged the contract or I would prove I was just a kid who didn't belong. I took a deep breath. "Mr. van der Merwe," I said, striving to keep my voice steady, "I understand that price is important, but Ross Heritage Jewelers doesn't just buy diamonds. We build long-term relationships. We have the strongest distribution network in the U.S., and our reputation ensures that your diamonds will be valued higher than with any competitor." I proposed a new deal, increasing the profit-sharing percentage for the supplier in exchange for a 2-year exclusivity commitment. I glanced at my grandfather, hoping for a sign, but he just sat there expressionless. After a tense discussion, Mr. van der Merwe nodded. "Kid, you know how to negotiate," he said, his smile widening. "I'm in." The room let out a collective sigh of relief, and for the first time I saw a different look in the director's eyes. Not skepticism, but respect, albeit cautious. My grandfather said nothing, but as the meeting ended, he stood, placed a hand lightly on my shoulder, and left. Graduation marked a turning point in my life. I was no longer the boy who feared my grandfather's stern gaze or the teenager who dodged taunts. I had become a man of resolve, ready to face the challenges of the business world. The day I wore my first custom-tailored suit and looked in the mirror, I saw the difference clearly. No longer the trembling 12-year-old who stepped into the mansion years ago, but an adult who knew where he was headed. Deep down, I understood. Ross Heritage Jewelers wasn't just my grandfather's company. It was becoming a part of me, and I was determined to prove I was worthy of it. In the first few years after graduating from university, I threw myself into work with a burning passion. I was just 23, an age when many of my peers were still searching for their path in life, but I was already sitting in strategic meetings facing executives twice my age and negotiating with international partners in far-off cities like London or Dubai. Ross Heritage Jewelers wasn't just a jewelry company, it was an empire, and I was learning how to become a part of it. Every day I worked from early morning until late at night, reviewing accounts, overseeing marketing campaigns, and ensuring that every diamond, every ring sold carried the true value of the Ross brand. My grandfather, though still the chairman, gradually handed over more responsibilities to me, and his gaze was no longer just scrutinizing. Sometimes I caught a glimmer of pride in his eyes, though he never said it out loud. But just when I thought I had found my footing, a storm from the past came crashing in. One afternoon, while I was reviewing financial reports in my office, Raymond knocked on the door, his expression unusually serious. "Master Ashton," he said, his voice low. "There's someone here to see you. They're in the drawing room." I frowned, not recalling any scheduled meetings. "Who is it, Raymond?" He hesitated, then replied, "It's your parents." My heart seemed to stop. Patrick and Paula Ross, names I had tried to bury deep in my memory, now resurfacing like ghosts from the past. I stood up, my hands trembling slightly, unsure of what I should feel. Anger, pain, or a naive flicker of hope that they had returned out of regret. I walked down the stairs, each step feeling like it carried 1,000 pounds, and when I pushed open the drawing room door, I saw them. My father, Patrick, sat on the sofa, much older than I remembered. His hair was streaked with gray, his face gaunt, his eyes bloodshot as if still bearing the marks of countless nights at the gambling table. My mother, Paula, sat beside him, thinner than before, her hands clasped tightly as if trying to hold on to some semblance of calm. They looked up at me. "Ashton?" My mother spoke first, her voice trembling. Are you doing well? I've missed you so much." Her words made my heart clench, but I didn't let my emotions take over. "You missed me?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. "It's been 11 years, Mom. 11 years since you and Dad left me with nothing but a note." My father lowered his head, avoiding my gaze. "Ashton, we had no choice," he said, his voice hoarse. "We owed too much. If we had stayed, we would have dragged you down with us." I wanted to scream at them, to ask why they didn't fight for me, why they chose gambling and debt over their own son. But I held back, remembering my grandfather's words. Discipline is controlling yourself even when your heart wants to explode. "So what do you want now?" I asked, my voice calm but razor sharp. My mother hesitated, then said, We need help, Ashton. Your father is sick and we owe a large sum. You're working for your grandfather's company, aren't you? Just a little. You could help us." Her words hit like a knife. They hadn't come back out of remorse, not for family. They came back for money. I looked at them, feeling the old scar in my heart bleed anew. "Help?" I repeated, my voice bitter. "You left me when I was 12 without an explanation, without a single call. Now when I have something you need, you show up? Is that why you're here?" My father shot to his feet, his face flushed with anger. "How dare you talk to your parents like that? I raised you, gave you a roof over your head, and now you're so ungrateful you'd watch us suffer?" I gave a bitter laugh, unable to hold it back any longer. "A roof? More like a house full of arguments and debt. You chose the casino over me. Don't talk to me about raising me." My mother burst into tears, covering her face. "Ashton, please, don't be like this. I know I was wrong, but we're family. You can't turn your back on family." Her words made me waver. A small part of me, however faint, still yearned for family, still wanted to believe they had changed. But then I remembered the note, the years of loneliness, and I knew that family bond had died long ago. Raymond stood in the corner of the room silently observing. When my parents left, taking nothing but a promise to return, he walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Master Ashton, you did the right thing," he said, his voice warm and steady. "Setting boundaries isn't cruelty. It's how you protect yourself." I nodded, but my heart still felt heavy. "Raymond, why does it still hurt? I thought I was over this." He gave a sad smile. "Master Ashton, wounds from family never fully heal. But you're stronger than them. Don't let them pull you down." In the months that followed, my parents reappeared a few more times, each time with a new excuse. Gambling debts, illness, or even belated apologies. They cried, begged, and tried to guilt me. Once my father even showed up at the company office, shouting in front of the staff, "Who do you think you are, Ashton? Just a lucky kid your grandfather picked up." I stood there, my heart pounding, but I didn't let my emotions take over. "Dad," I said calmly, "you abandoned me when I needed you most. You have no right to be here anymore." When my grandfather heard about my parents' reappearances, he said only one thing: "Those who abandon their own flesh and blood have no right to return just for money." His words were cold, but true. I gradually learned to let go of the illusion of my parents, to set boundaries as Raymond advised. Each time they showed up, I grew tougher, but it also hurt more. I didn't want to become a cruel person, but I knew that if I didn't protect myself, I'd be dragged back into the abyss of my past. Raymond remained by my side, like a guiding light. One evening after my parents left again, leaving me with an empty feeling, he brought me a cup of tea and sat down. "Master Ashton, do you remember rule number 4? He asked. I nodded. "Take responsibility." He smiled. "Exactly. But responsibility isn't just to the company or to Mr. Howard. It's to yourself too. You don't owe them anything, Ashton. You only owe yourself a better life." At 27, I made waves in the industry with a creative marketing strategy. A jewelry collection inspired by family heritage, integrated with QR codes that allowed customers to trace the origin of gemstones. Thanks to this strategy, the company's revenue surged by 25% in just the first quarter. And articles in Forbes and Bloomberg began referring to me as the promising heir of the Ross Empire. I worked tirelessly, from analyzing market data through Google Analytics to holding virtual meetings with partners via Zoom, ensuring every detail in the supply chain was flawless. Life seemed to be on the right track, and I felt I had truly earned the Ross name. But then everything changed in a single moment. During a board meeting in October, my grandfather, Howard Ross, who always sat at the head of the table with the unyielding presence of a general, suddenly clutched his chest, his face turning pale. His eyes, usually sharp as a blade, clouded with pain. The room fell silent. I rushed to his side, my hands trembling. "Grandfather, what's wrong?" I asked, my voice choked, gripping his hand tightly. He gave a faint nod, his voice weak. "It's nothing. Just tired." But I knew it wasn't true. An ambulance arrived, and after a series of tests at a top hospital in Nichols Hills, the doctors diagnosed him with congestive heart failure, a common condition in older adults. He was prescribed medication to stabilize his heart rate and lower cholesterol, but the doctors warned that he needed rest and to avoid stress. Nearly impossible for someone like my grandfather. His health declined rapidly. He no longer came to the office every day, instead joining meetings via video calls from his home office, his tired face appearing on the laptop screen. His voice grew hoarse, and sometimes he had to pause to catch his breath. I was overwhelmed with worry and mental turmoil. I feared that my grandfather would leave me before I could do anything to repay his kindness. Then one afternoon, he called me into his study where he sat in his old leather chair, a digital blood pressure monitor, a modern device he reluctantly used by his side. "Ashton, he said, his voice weak but still sharp. I don't have much time left. The company needs you. From now on, you'll sign off on major contracts, attend board meetings, and stand before the staff as a true leader. I opened my mouth to protest, but before I could speak, he continued, pushing an old leather-bound folder tied with twine toward me. Open it, he said, his voice low but resolute. I opened the folder, my heart pounding. Inside was a handwritten journal chronicling my journey from the day I first stepped into the mansion. His firm handwriting described the time I cleared the garden for being late to school, the time I saved a contract at 18, and even the nights he quietly stood outside my room watching me do my homework. I've been watching you from the start, he said, his eyes softening in a rare moment. Not to control you, but to see if you were worthy of the Ross name. Next were CPS, Child Protective Services, documents from when I was 12, cold pages proving that my parents had legally abandoned me. They had signed away their parental rights, leaving my grandfather's address as my sole guardian. Reading those lines, I felt a weight in my chest, as if the old scar was bleeding again. Finally, he handed me a sealed, handwritten letter, his trembling but clear script visible on the envelope. Don't open it early, he warned, his gaze stern. It will explain everything when I'm gone. Then he took my hand, his thin but still strong grip tightening. A legacy isn't just gold or jewelry stores, he said, his voice etching itself into my heart. A true legacy is honor. Never let the Ross name be tarnished. You've already proven yourself, now protect it. His words weren't just advice, they were a will, a lifelong responsibility. I nodded, my eyes stinging, determined not to let tears fall in front of him. Raymond stood in the background, silently watching. His eyes glimmered with a mix of pride and sadness. He understood that this moment wasn't just about passing down wealth. It was about passing down trust and a lifetime of responsibility. As we left the room, Raymond patted my shoulder, his voice warm and steady. Master Ashton, Mr. Howard chose you not because of blood, but because you forged yourself. Now it's time to prove it. I nodded, the weight of responsibility heavy on my shoulders, but also a new fire igniting within me. From that moment, I officially stepped into the role of the chosen heir. I led the company through challenging months as my grandfather underwent surgery to place a stent to clear his arteries. I signed off on major contracts, from expanding stores to investing in blockchain technology to ensure gemstone traceability. I met with employees sharing a vision. We don't just sell jewelry, we sell trust, and that trust must endure. Each decision was a test, but I was no longer afraid as I once was. I had been shaped by years of trials, guided by my grandfather's lessons and words, like a lighthouse illuminating my path. In December of that year, I was in London, meeting with a major partner to negotiate a contract for pearl supplies from Japan. The Christmas spirit enveloped the city, with twinkling lights lining Oxford Street and church bells echoing in the distance. I stood in a glass-walled meeting room in a high-rise building, presenting plans to expand Ross Heritage Jewelers into Europe, utilizing AR technology to let customers virtually try on jewelry through a mobile app. Everything was going smoothly, and I felt confident, as if I had truly mastered my grandfather's legacy. Then on Christmas Eve, my phone buzzed. It was Raymond. His voice, trembling through the speaker, was unlike his usual calm demeanor. Master Ashton, Mr. Howard, he's gone. I stood frozen, the phone nearly slipping from my hand. My grandfather had passed away in his sleep in his study at the mansion, next to his notebook of company records and the digital blood pressure monitor, the final traces of the months he spent battling heart disease. I canceled all my plans, booked the earliest flight back to Oklahoma City, my heart pounding as if it might burst. On the 10-hour flight, I stared out the window, seeing only endless darkness, as if the world had dimmed along with him. When I stepped into the mansion, the air felt heavy as lead. Raymond embraced me at the door, his eyes red but striving to remain composed. Master Ashton, he passed peacefully. He was so proud of you. I nodded, my throat tight, unable to speak. I walked into my grandfather's study where everything remained unchanged. The oak bookshelf, the ticking pendulum clock, and his portrait in a gray suit. But he was no longer there. Only I remained, along with the responsibility he had left behind. My grandfather, Howard Ross's funeral was held solemnly at Nichols Hills United Methodist Church. A historic church with white stone columns and stained glass windows gleaming under Oklahoma's winter sun. That day the air was bitterly cold, but the church was packed. Relatives, company employees, longtime partners, hundreds attended, from board directors in black suits to sales staff from Ross Heritage Jewelers stores across the U.S. The atmosphere was a strange mix, genuine grief from those who respected him, people he had shaped with his iron discipline, and calculating glances from some family members. I sat in the front row next to Raymond, who, in his black suit, looked older than ever. My father, Patrick Ross, and my uncles Anthony and Philip were all present. The first time in years they had gathered. They sat a few rows behind me, whispering to each other, their eyes avoiding the polished walnut coffin. My father, now in his 60s, his hair fully white, his face gaunt from years of gambling and debt. Uncle Anthony, who had tried and failed at his own business ventures, scanned the room with envy. Uncle Philip, the laziest of the three brothers, sat silently, but I could sense the scheming in his fleeting glances toward me. They didn't cry for my grandfather. They cried for what they thought they deserved. Loneliness surged as I looked at them, my own flesh and blood, who cared little for the man we had lost. I felt like an outsider in my own family, with only Raymond by my side, quietly holding my hand to lend me strength. The pastor began his sermon, describing my grandfather as a pillar of Nichols Hills, a man who built Ross Heritage Jewelers from a single store into an empire with over 50 locations, integrating technology to lead the jewelry industry. A longtime employee stood up, voice choked. Mr. Ross never gave praise, but he taught us that discipline is the key to success. I sat there, tears streaming down my face, remembering the years he made me clear the garden for being late to school. The times he looked at me with a sharp but expectant gaze. That was his love, though he never spoke it aloud. But when I glanced at my father and uncles, I saw them whispering, their eyes glinting as they mentioned the legacy. They weren't here to mourn. They were here to wait. After the funeral, the group moved to the office of Lawrence Monroe, the attorney, in a modern glass building in downtown Oklahoma City. The atmosphere was tense, like a taut string about to snap. Family members sat around a long wooden table facing a large screen displaying electronic documents. A blend of tradition and technology, just like my grandfather's style. Monroe, a tall man with gold-rimmed glasses, began reading the will and trust. All of Mr. Howard Ross's assets, including his shares in Ross Heritage Jewelers, the network of over 50 stores, real estate holdings, and the Nichols Hills mansion, are bequeathed to his grandson, Ashton Ross. Those words detonated like a bomb in the room. The total value of the estate, estimated at approximately $125 million, reflected Ross Heritage's success in the digital era. My father, Patrick, flushed red and slammed the table. He's leaving his own son out in the cold? What kind of joke is this? Uncle Anthony chimed in, his voice shrill. Ashton's just a lucky kid. He can't handle this empire. Uncle Philip nodded, his eyes blazing. We're his sons, we're the ones who deserve it. They glared at me like I was an enemy, forgetting that they had abandoned me when I was 12. Monroe continued, his voice steady but authoritative. The three sons, Patrick, Anthony, and Philip, each receive a symbolic inheritance of $50,000 as a gesture of honor. He went on, a no-contest clause. If any of the three sons file a lawsuit to dispute the will, they will forfeit even this small inheritance. The trust is irrevocable unless there is evidence of fraud or undue influence. This clause, designed to prevent baseless litigation, ensured my grandfather's wishes would be upheld. Then came the most dramatic part, a 90-day challenge clause. Ashton must prove his ability to maintain the company's stability and achieve positive profits for 3 consecutive months. If he fails, the entire estate will be transferred to a charitable foundation for abandoned children, reflecting Mr. Howard's values. This was the final test, a way for my grandfather to ensure his legacy went to someone worthy. The room erupted in outrage. My father stood, pointing at me. "Who do you think you are, Ashton? Just a kid your grandfather picked up." Uncle Anthony shouted, "We'll sue! We won't let this kid take everything." Uncle Philip, usually silent, added, 90 days? He'll crumble, just wait." The employees and partners remained quiet, some nodding in support of me. They had seen me steer the company through a supply chain crisis when diamond prices soared due to conflicts in Africa. I sat silently, my heart pounding, cold sweat running down my spine. This was the greatest challenge of my life, not just about money, but about proving I was worthy of my grandfather's trust. I remembered his words, "A true legacy is honor." Raymond squeezed my hand under the table, whispering, "Master Ashton, Mr. Howard believed in you. Now it's time to shine." I took a deep breath and looked directly at my father and uncles. This is grandfather's will. I won't let him down. But inside, I knew the next 90 days would be a fierce battle. Not only against the pressures of the board, but against the schemes of my own family. The days following the announcement of the will, the atmosphere at Ross Heritage Jewelers headquarters in downtown Oklahoma City was heavy, like the calm before a storm. The 90-day challenge my grandfather had set to keep the company stable and achieve positive profits was not just a test of ability, but a battle for survival. I knew my father, Patrick, and my uncles Anthony and Philip wouldn't sit idly by. The no contest clause in the will prevented them from filing lawsuits, but I sensed they were plotting to sabotage me, waiting for me to fail so the entire estate would go to a charitable foundation, or worse, so they could find a way to manipulate the outcome afterward. Their schemes began sooner than I expected. Just a week after the funeral, an article appeared on a local online financial news site with a sensational headline, "Ashton Ross, Young Heir or Threat to the Ross Heritage Empire." The article cited insider sources claiming I lacked experience, that the company was losing trust from major suppliers, and that sales were at risk of plummeting. I read the article in my office, my face flushing with anger. I knew who was behind it, my father and uncles. Unable to attack directly, they were using the media to undermine the board's confidence in me. The board of directors began to waver. During a Zoom meeting, Mr. Gerald Thompson, a veteran director, looked at me through the screen, his voice laced with doubt. "Ashton, are you sure you can keep the company stable for 90 days? We can't risk Ross Heritage's reputation." The other faces on the screen mirrored his skepticism. I took a deep breath, maintaining the composure my grandfather had taught me. "Mr. Thompson," I replied firmly, "I've led the company through a supply chain crisis. I understand this pressure. Give me 90 days and I'll prove myself." But inside, the pressure felt like a boulder on my shoulders. My father and uncles didn't stop at the article. They began contacting senior employees, sowing doubts about my leadership. One morning, I received an email from a store manager in Dallas reporting that Ms. Linda Carter, a veteran in the finance department, was spreading rumors that I was deliberately hiding data to inflate reports. I immediately summoned her. In the meeting room, Linda fidgeted, her eyes avoiding mine, mumbling about hearing it from a reliable source. I didn't need to ask further. I knew it was my father, who had known her before my grandfather fired him for gambling. I gave her an ultimatum: work honestly or leave. Linda apologized, head bowed, but I knew this was just one of many schemes to come. The pressure mounted. Soon after, a major supplier in Italy, Signor Bianchi, suddenly announced he was considering pulling out of a contract because he'd heard the company was unstable. I knew my father was behind it. The meeting with Bianchi became a turning point. I stayed calm, affirmed that Ross Heritage was a lasting legacy, and offered a higher profit-sharing deal along with a 3-year exclusivity commitment. After a moment of hesitation, he nodded in agreement. The contract was re-signed, and I breathed a sigh of relief. But I knew this was only the first victory in a long war. Back in Oklahoma City, I learned that some employees were growing uneasy, worried about the company's future. In an all-staff meeting, I stood before 200 employees, from salespeople to regional directors, my voice trembling slightly but clear. I know there are rumors, but I promise you, Ross Heritage will not fall. We will grow stronger, for Mr. Howard, for our legacy, and for ourselves. A few clapped, but I saw doubt in other eyes. I knew I had to act fast. The Legacy Collection launched in the second month of the challenge. But during that time, my father and uncles didn't relent. They continued to stir trouble, contacting major clients and spreading baseless rumors about business plans and product quality. I was forced to constantly meet with partners, reassuring each one that the company remained strong and was on a growth trajectory. The 90 days passed like a whirlwind. On the final day, I stood before the board presenting the results. Revenue had increased by 18%. Major contracts were secured, and the Legacy Collection had become a sensation. The board stood and applauded, and Mr. Thompson, the one who had doubted me, shook my hand firmly. "You did it, Ashton." My father and uncles, upon hearing the results, made one last appearance at the office, their faces heavy with defeat. My father tried to cling to hope, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "You're my son, Ashton. I have a right to this company." Anthony snarled, his face red. "This company belongs to the Ross family. You can't take it all." Philip, in contrast, didn't shout, only smirked bitterly, his eyes full of contempt, as if my efforts were just fleeting luck. I stood tall, looking directly at my father and each uncle, my voice cold but resolute. Power doesn't come from blood. It comes from responsibility and honor. You abandoned me. Grandfather, he stayed. The room fell silent. My father staggered, as if my words had struck him down, his eyes hollow before he quietly turned away. Anthony slammed his hand on the table but said nothing more. Philip gave me one last glance, his bitter smile lingering, then turned and left. They walked out of the office, utterly defeated, leaving behind an atmosphere both heavy and liberating. Raymond stood beside me, offering a rare smile. "Master Ashton, Mr. Howard is smiling somewhere," he said. I nodded, my eyes stinging. I had won, not just in keeping the company, but in upholding the honor my grandfather had entrusted to me. As I stepped out of the meeting room, the afternoon sunlight of Oklahoma City streamed through the glass windows, illuminating the hallway of Ross Heritage Jewelers headquarters, where paintings chronicling the company's history hung neatly on the walls. I paused before my grandfather's portrait, Howard Ross in his gray suit, his gaze sharp yet filled with pride. I felt he was still watching me, not with the scrutiny of when I was 12, but with quiet satisfaction. The 90-day challenge was over, and I had proven that I was not just the abandoned grandson. I was Ashton Ross, the worthy heir of the empire he had built. Ross Heritage Jewelers was now stronger than ever. The Legacy Collection was not only a commercial success, but also a story of discipline, honor, and perseverance. We continued to expand, opening new stores in Dallas and Houston. But this victory was more than numbers. It was a testament to my journey. From a trembling 12-year-old stepping into the mansion to a 35-year-old man leading an empire. My father, Patrick, and my uncles Anthony and Philip gradually lost all influence. After their humiliating defeat in the 90-day challenge, they no longer appeared at the mansion or the office. I heard once that my father tried to open a small casino in Nevada but quickly failed due to debts. Anthony and Philip vanished from Nichols Hills, regarded with contempt by the community, not because they were poor, but because they had forsaken honor, the value my grandfather always placed above all else. Oklahoma City in 2025, despite its modern glass buildings and booming social media, still valued family and reputation, and my father and uncles had lost both. To honor my grandfather, I organized a ceremony at the company's headquarters, launching the Howard Collection. Each piece of jewelry inspired by a detail from his life, like a ring modeled after the pendulum clock in his study. or a necklace engraved with the phrase, "Discipline is freedom." The event drew hundreds of guests, from international partners to longtime employees. I stood on the stage before my grandfather's portrait and spoke. Howard Ross didn't just leave behind a company. He left a lesson that honor and discipline are a timeless legacy. The crowd applauded, and I saw Raymond standing in the corner of the room, his eyes gleaming with pride. But the most meaningful moment came on a quiet evening when I opened the safe in the study and took out the sealed handwritten letter my grandfather had left me. I had kept it for months, too afraid to face what he had written. Now, with the company stable, I felt ready. I tore open the envelope, my hands trembling, and read his final words. "Ashton, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But I want you to know, I didn't choose you because you're my grandson. I chose you because you chose to rise even when life pushed you down. I watched you grow from a frightened boy to a man of resolve. My legacy isn't gold or jewels. It's you and the way you live with honor. Keep going and never forget. Discipline will set you free." Tears fell onto the paper, blurring his handwriting. I sat there in the study where he once sat, feeling as if he were still here, guiding me through every decision. Raymond knocked on the door, carrying a familiar cup of mint tea. "Master Ashton, are you all right?" he asked, his gaze gentle. I handed him the letter, my voice choked. "Raymond, grandfather, he believed in me from the start." Raymond read the letter and smiled. "Master Ashton, he didn't just believe in you, he loved you in his own way. And now you're living up to everything he hoped for." From then on, I led Ross Heritage Jewelers with a renewed mission. In a meeting with young employees, I stood before them not as a cold CEO, but as someone who had faced trials like theirs. "Don't fear discipline," I said. "It doesn't confine you, it frees you from weakness. And don't just protect wealth, protect honor. Because honor is what safeguards a family and a company across generations." Those words I knew were not just mine, they were my grandfather's, passed through me. One evening I stood on the mansion's balcony looking out at Oklahoma City glowing under the city lights. Raymond stood beside me, now more like family than a butler. "Master Ashton, you've come a long way," he said, his voice warm. I nodded, smiling. "And you were always there, Raymond." "Thank you." He shook his head, his eyes twinkling. "I just brought the tea, Master Ashton. You're the one who made it all happen." In my heart, my grandfather, Howard Ross, remained present, not as a stern figure, but as a lighthouse guiding my path. I looked back on my journey, from the 12-year-old boy waking up in a cold house clutching the note my parents left behind, to the man standing at the helm of an empire. The greatest legacy my grandfather left wasn't gold or jewelry stores. It was discipline, honor, and the strength to face any challenge. And I knew, no matter what lay ahead, I would continue to uphold the Ross name, never letting it be tarnished, just as he had instructed.